Stillwater's Morning Scramble at 10 minutes after 8 o'clock. And the mayor's in. Mayor Will Joyce. It's time now for So You Wanted to Be Mayor.
Good morning, Steve.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Good weekend, I think. So,
Yeah, nice Father's Day, and it was pretty quiet.
did you stay home or do
Yep.
because people are getting out and about? And
Yeah, I mean, we didn't go out. You know, I did see my dad and my father-in-law, so we said hello to folks. And
how they doing?
They're doing fine. Yeah, I mean, they're doing fine.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to give their age, but they're under 80.
Yes,
Okay.
they're both under 80. Yes.
In case they're listening, are they under 70?
They're about 10 years apart. My parents are fairly young, and my in-laws are a little older. So.
Okay. All right. For some reason, I felt like Bob Barker there for a second. Are they under 70? So
My parents, my parents met and married in the Army in Germany in
really?
the early 70s. They both joined the Army right out of high school in like 72, and met each other at an Army base in Germany, got married in Germany, and then moved back to Tulsa in like 75 or 76.
Now, where were they both from?
My dad grew up. My dad's dad was an Army colonel, and he was so he moved around quite a bit. He was
Yeah.
born in Oregon, but he grew up most of his high school years in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
My mom is from New Hampshire,
Yeah.
which is where I get all my New England sports fandom from.
It-
So yeah, they were from opposite parts of the
Okay.
country.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so
Is
they
New Hampshire, the state that their license says live free or
live
die?
free or die.
Yeah.
Yeah, New Hampshire is one of those
They had a meeting for
northeast
that.
New England states that are just like outside of the coast cities in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
which there's not that many. I mean, New Hampshire's pretty small, but when you get into rural New Hampshire, it's very similar to rural Oklahoma.
Yeah. I've never been there.
It's a beautiful state. Now, I say, very similar in some ways, but it's also got beautiful mountains and forests and crystal clear lakes that you can see the bottom of from 10
Yeah.
feet.
Green Mountains,
20
are they
feet.
there?
Well, so Vermont, I think, is more
Where the Green Mountain Boys?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the White Mountains are in New Hampshire, and it's beautiful.
No, I've
Upstate
never
New
been to
Hampshire
either one of those.
Is very pretty. So we used to. That's where most of my family vacations were
That's awesome.
too. In when I was a kid. So
So anyway,
um,
so happy Father's
anyway,
Day.
yeah, my parents came back here after the Army and were students at OSU, and that's how I ended up in Stillwater.
That's cool. That's very cool. So you wanted to be mayor, and you are now.
I am.
And
Yep.
they're proud of that, aren't they?
They are. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think they lived here for a long time. They live down in Edmond now, but yeah. I mean, I think they appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that my dad was always somebody who was a little more behind the scenes, but always involved. Was a deacon at church and was always helping somebody out or trying to contribute. So I saw that and saw his the work that he did above and beyond just going to work every day and doing the things he had to do. So it's something I learned from him.
You were taught by watching, which is the best
Yeah,
way.
It is. I think so.
Rather than walk the walk.
Well, yeah. I mean, you want to see. I think a lot of times you hear people talk about service or being willing to do something or going above all that kind of stuff.
Lead
But,
by example.
especially with your dad. I mean,
Yeah.
sort of being Father's Day. I mean, that's what you see. What you actually you get to see what really happens and where they really spend their time and how they really invest. And I think that's something that I think about with my kids too. I mean, just I don't I want them to see the authentic stuff that I care about. And how I spend my time and how I act at home and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's how kids learn it. I mean, they don't
I agree.
listen to me on the radio or they don't read the newspaper. They don't see the external stuff that most people see. They see how I am at home, and so I try really hard to make sure those things are congruent.
Good message. Good message. Weekend.
Not saying I'm good at it all the time, but I
no.
try.
Yeah. Let's talk about what's going on. First of all, in Stillwater.
Yeah.
We do have the numbers continuing to rise,
Yes, we
without
do.
a doubt. I talked to Shyla Eggers with Stillwater Medical. I think I talked to her on Thursday, I believe. It could have been Friday, but I
Yeah.
think it was Thursday. No, it was Friday. And her message was the mask and all that stuff, but that the numbers are young folks, but in the last few days, a generation above that were starting to show up, which means they're going home to their parents or they're going to work or church or wherever it is. And so that spread has moved to a different generation. The numbers aren't as high. Is that what you're saying?
Honestly, since Friday, I haven't talked to the health department to see exactly the demographics. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what we certainly expect to see. That it's not going to just sort of stick in one age group. And really, from the beginning of sort of June, when we started to see these numbers really start to skyrocket, it has been a plurality. I mean, the biggest group is within the 20 to 27 age group, but it's not just in that age group. And so, we've talked about it's not just young people that need to be taking precautions. We all need to make sure we're continuing to take the precautions we've been talking about for months now. And be sure to social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, all this stuff we've been, people are tired of hearing and tired of doing. It is all still very important because we are seeing statewide those numbers just really kind of explode.
I know that we need to get that message up, and we talked about it a lot in the first hour, so I am guilty of the same thing.
Sure.
I would almost say that they're more tired of hearing about it than doing it, because you kind of get used to it after a while.
That's probably true. I could see that. Yeah, I mean, I think, at this point you're sort of going, yeah, we're doing that. We're doing it. But not everybody's doing it. So the people who have been, I think, practicing it well are tired. And I think everybody's tired of hearing about it, whether you're actually doing it or not. But that's one of the challenges for us right now in talking to the hospital and OSU and the health department and kind of communications planning is saying, how do you communicate this message well at this point, given that we've been saying it over and over for months? It's really hard to kind of come up with a new way of saying it that's going to get people's attention.
Well, and I'm torn with that too. How often do we continue to mention it over and over?
Yeah.
And we did a lot in the first hour, probably. We were just talking about numbers and what might happen after the rally this weekend, and everybody will be watching that. And it'll take a while.
Yeah.
But so I think it needs to be. We need to go to that well. But I also, a side of me thinks they've already made up their mind. If they're not wearing one by now, they've already determined not to. So should we stop? And probably we shouldn't, because it's just like discussing anything else. So you know what I mean? You don't know, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's you start asking a question of what does it take? What will it take? Because you're right. I mean, there's a certain group of people who are definitely going to wear a mask every time they go out. And even if I wasn't saying it, they would still be doing it. And there's a certain group who are never going to wear one, no matter how much we say it, and in fact probably less likely to wear one the more we say it.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do we, what does it take to get some of those folks to change their mind?
I saw your you liked or you retweeted one where you had I believe Frank Lucas and Senator Langford were both wearing masks at the rally.
Yes.
Which was not necessarily an easy decision for them, I imagine. I imagine they did have to think about it, because I saw Senator Langford on a show, and he was asked, and he was explaining how he wore one everywhere he went he went, and then they asked him if he was going to wear one at the rally, and he said, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he wanted to answer that question at the time. Clearly, I don't know that he was anticipating it, which surprised me, because he almost froze in his tracks. But I was very pleased, because obviously there's a bell whistle that goes along with this too.
Yeah.
And and Senator Inhofe was sitting in front of them, and he chose not to.
Yeah.
But they did choose to wear a mask, and you thank them.
Yeah.
And they probably saw it coming from a mayor. I imagine they both saw that. But I think that's important, because they are setting an example, and those are leaders.
And that I think is part of the issue we have with trying to get this message out, is that we're not getting a consistent message from all different levels and leaders, in certainly in the government realm. There are different folks in different places who aren't, and who haven't and won't. I mean, I don't think I don't know, probably this is overstatement, but I'm not sure I can remember seeing a picture of the governor in a mask. There may have been one, but he's certainly not
right
pushing that message. And in this
you
can disagree about
Yeah.
whether you need one or not. But I mean, when the state health department and the national health department in the CDC are both saying you should be wearing these, especially if you're in an indoor crowded situation, I don't understand why the political leaders who are part of those, that kind of an event, would not follow the advice of the government health organizations that we spend tax money on to hire experts and to do research and to make recommendations for the health of the community. And why would an elected representative or official not follow that advice in public? I just, it does not make any sense to me.
Yeah. 2020 hasn't made much sense, so I think that's part of it. But the leaders who are really respected, and especially, say, sports figures, I think especially conservative sports figures, because that would kind of go against maybe what people would expect. Mm-hmm. If they would show up in a mask, I think it would send a message, because people of all ages, I mean, they look up to them. They really do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of trying to communicate these things, is getting, having people who others see and respect and listen to have them help spread the message. And again, that's kind of part of our struggle here, is that we're not getting a consistent message from all those types of people. And I know the city has done some marketing around, people in town who are wearing masks and why they wear them. And, we've tried to the hospital has done some good advertising, the last few days with why it's important to wear a mask and that sort of thing. But it's a struggle to get a consistent message across. I don't know if you saw this. I saw it on Twitter last night, and I need to find it and retweet it. But it was a picture from a college football game in 1918 or 1919, and the whole crowd is wearing masks.
Georgia Tech.
Yes. Yeah.
I had Scott Petty on the phone and Rob Hill, and Rob is he could be a detective, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Because I gave him that picture.
Oh, yeah?
I showed him that picture, and I said, describe what you're seeing. And he described every part of it. He goes, well, it's in probably the early 1900s based on, and he was looking at stuff. and Scott Petty goes, man, he's painting a picture for us. But it was at a football game, and they were it looked like it could be today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was funny because they were all the same, like, white cloth masks that everybody was wearing. But, I mean, so clearly 100 years ago, there was some either communication or rule that was in place that got people to wear masks. And, we've got to figure out how to do that, and on a consistent scale, because that doesn't, that's one of our struggles locally with some of these rules, is that, one, they're not as effective. They're not very effective at all if they are just local rules. Right, because people here in Stillwater are in Oklahoma City and Tulsa and Guthrie and Perkins and Cushing, and they're everywhere every day, and without consistent application of rules like that across all those areas, it doesn't really matter. If you can go catch it and bring it back, then having a local rule is much less worthwhile. And so one of the things, like with businesses, we talk about, if we were going to go move back, if we talk about moving back to phase 2 and making businesses, limit their sizes down more and take more of these restrictive things, I have a real problem with putting harmful restrictions, business restrictions, on my local business owners in Stillwater when businesses around the area are not being asked to do the same thing. And, are we really having any demonstrable public health benefit by just doing that to our businesses in Stillwater, hurting them financially, but not really helping anybody not catch the virus, because all those people are just going somewhere else?
Right.
And that's what becomes really difficult from a local standpoint, is to say, well, now we're just hurting local businesses without actually making that much of a dent in the public health benefit, because nobody else is doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Tell me how this works in the state of Oklahoma. I think we've talked about this before, but I saw this, they kind of changed this in Arkansas. Asa Hutchinson is the governor there, and they're having spikes. They're having big time in the Fayetteville, Bentonville area. It's pretty bad there. But so they were having stricter rules, and the governor didn't feel that they should be able to, and so I think he basically overruled their rules. And that goes back to what we've talked about before. The people that cry they want local control don't allow anybody else to have local control. Yeah. Is it the same in Oklahoma?
So in Oklahoma, we do chartered cities, certain cities in Oklahoma. Stillwater is one of them. Most of the reasonably larger cities have the ability to make local rules that are more restrictive than the state's rules or rules that the governor makes. So we do have the ability to make those rules more strict. The governor on his own can't say, no, you can't do that. The legislature has, and one of the things we talked about before is the legislature preempting local control on certain issues, right? So they came in last year and said, you can't make any laws about single-use plastic bags, right? So the legislature has to specifically say, cities, you can't legislate on this topic. They did that a few years ago with oil drilling,
right,
fracking around the town limits, right? So that was a big issue here in Stillwater 5 or 6 years ago.
So you want to be mayor?
The legislature has that ability to do it. The governor doesn't. There was a bill that a state rep tried to just, honestly sneak in at the last second at the end of this last session to take away part of the city's ability to legislate in a health crisis. It failed in the Senate, thankfully. And I think we talked about it here on the show with Senator Coleman. But no, we do have the ability. We can do that. Again, I think part of the problem, especially in an issue like this, where it's not just a local issue. I am all for local control and the city making its own decisions and being able to decide, and we will certainly do that, when we feel it's necessary. And we did. We acted before the state did back in March. But from an effectiveness standpoint, from a public health standpoint, having these individual little communities make these little rules is sort of silly. It doesn't on an issue like this. You're talking about truly regional and statewide problems. You're not just talking about something that only affects people in Stillwater or not, because we're mobile. We're so mobile. In 1919, it probably was a lot easier if just one community made that rule, because you didn't have so many people in and out every day. Going to shop, going to work, so our community is such a hub of all this activity that having just one local rule from an effectiveness standpoint, it probably would help. It's better than nothing, which is what a lot of people are saying, and that's probably true. But it has a detrimental effect. And is the positive effect from having the rule in place locally, is it worth the extra detrimental effect that we're putting on our local businesses and our business owners here, and our employers and the people who are working at these businesses who lose their jobs if they don't need to be,
right,
if they have to, is that economic effect worth the small public health benefit we get from being the only one out here on an island trying to do something about it? And that's where I get, very concerned with the fact that the state is not acting more demonstrably on these issues, because this is truly an issue of statewide concern, where there needs to be more comprehensive planning and rules in place.
With the numbers, they are going up. I know you're
Yes.
monitoring that, and you're monitoring hospitalizations, especially. I
Yeah.
think. Well, what changes, if any, could we see in the next few days?
The easiest thing probably is to just step back back to phase 2 in our opening plan, which really wouldn't close any businesses down. It would go back. If you remember, phase 2 really had more of a 50% limited occupancy, an enforced 50% limited occupancy in restaurants, in bars, in places where people gather. It would apply to churches. It would apply, any of those places where people are going to be gathering and sitting together. And it's one of the things that we try to make a distinction about the risk levels of certain activities. Sitting down together in a closed room, less than 6 feet apart, is the highest risk thing you can do right now. It is absolutely the highest risk thing you can do. Where do you do that? You do that at a bar? Absolutely. Sitting, in an enclosed space with a high number of other people, talking loudly, yelling, it's a very high risk disease sort of a situation. One of the other places that is, not quite as high risk, but certainly involves the same sort of thing, are churches, because people sit together, in an enclosed space for an extended period of time, an hour or two. That is a location where it's certainly possible that you're going to have the amount of time and the amount of transmissions that would potentially lead to people getting sick. And so those kinds of things would be the things we'd go back and say, well, we need to limit the amount of people and the amount of time they're spending in these places.
And some of those with the churches, I think they've kind of self-imposed those rules.
Some of them have.
With additional services, and I don't know what percentage are wearing masks. I couldn't tell you.
I don't know either. I mean, I keep, of course, I just hear the stories. Well, I went to this and they weren't wearing masks, and I went to that, and, whether it's a church or a bar or a store or whatever it is.
Yeah. I know my mom's back to going to church, but she sits by herself.
Yeah.
She tells you. But she said maybe 2 people had a mask. And then I asked her if she wore hers, and she did not. Right? And she has 2.
Yeah.
But she said, but I was, and she was a distance away from everybody.
Sure.
But she did take it in, and she had it in her purse, but she did not wear it.
Yeah.
And I can't say if I was sitting on a bench by myself, a pew by myself, far away from everybody.
Yeah.
And she kind of described it as sort of like that, but she did not. So.
Yeah, and I mean, there
And that
are
was frustrating
decisions to be made
Yeah.
there. But I mean, I think it's my response to stuff like that is, I mean, is it really that big of a deal to just keep it on, just in case?
Yeah.
And people have different conditions and all that sort of stuff, and I understand that all that, but I don't think we're talking about, we're at this point, we're not down to the small percentage of people who have some kind of condition that keeps them from wearing a mask. We've got a lot of people who have no condition who just don't want to do it.
Here's my guess on that, though, and I agree completely with what you said. Let's say there was 40 people in the service, because there weren't very many.
Yeah.
It's a church of 200, but I
Yeah.
think it was, and they were spread. I think if, what did I say, 40?
Yeah.
I think if 30 of them would have had theirs on, she would have put hers on.
Sure.
Right?
Well,
because we do that. I mean, I've gotten out of my car and left it in the car, and then thought, oh shoot,
Realized,
when I see
yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, it follows through.
Yeah.
So my guess is if everybody would have had theirs on, she did go to graduation of my nephews and she wore hers.
Good.
But my brother made her. So.
Well, I think that's one of the things we've also talked about is that there are more businesses that I've seen that are saying you need to wear a mask when you come in, and requiring it of their customers, which
Right.
they have the absolute right to do. And if people have asked, well, what happens if they don't? Well, I mean, if you're a business owner or you're managing something like that, and you've asked people to wear masks and they don't, then you can ask them to leave. And if they don't leave, it's just like any other situation where you have somebody in your store where you've asked them to leave and they don't leave. If it's a trespassing complaint, you can call the police, and the police will come and they will enforce your trespassing complaint like they would in any situation. So it's not, businesses have the opportunity to do that. I see more of them are. I think places like churches, certainly these kinds of, somewhere where you're going to have your patrons or your parishioners or whoever it is come in and sit in relatively close proximity for an extended period of time, you should tell them they have to wear masks. I mean, you really, really should. If everybody in there is wearing a mask, it greatly reduces the opportunity for transmission. Does it keep it's not sterile. It doesn't make it an operating room. It doesn't make it the safest place in the world, but it's definitely better than not wearing the mask.
It also takes the pressure off of them whether should I or should I, because they had no choice.
Yeah.
With the rally on Saturday, and they'll be talking about that for years probably. But I saw some interviews ahead of time with people who were waiting, and they were asked, if you're told you have to wear one, will you? And the ones that I saw all said they would.
Yeah.
So if they have been asked, they weren't opposed to putting it on.
Yeah.
Most of them chose not to, but they did say, yeah, if I have to, I will.
Sure.
And so that takes the pressure off of them.
Yeah, I think you give people the space to do it, to feel like it's not. I don't, the psychology of the mask thing is just it's fascinating to me. I don't understand why people feel that way about it. But you're right. I mean, if you tell them, hey, listen, we want you to wear a mask. Please wear a mask when you come in. The vast majority of them are going to do it.
Yeah.
They may grumble about it, but if we just did it for a couple weeks and everybody had to do it, I think people would get used to it pretty quickly.
Again, to recap on this segment, anything that might be rolled back, it sounds like, and this isn't a sure thing, but if the numbers you're watching them every day, or is it, would be capacity more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that would be phase 2, right?
Yeah.
The first step back would be back to phase 2, which was really just capacity limitations and some crowd size limitations to try to keep those high risk transmission opportunities, as infrequent as possible. So that would be where we'd go. Now we'd talk about a mask rule again. We haven't ever really had a mask rule here. We did ask businesses to do that at one point, and then didn't want to put them on the front lines of having to enforce it, so we stepped back from it. But so we haven't really done a community-wide mask rule, but that's certainly something that we are discussing and trying to figure out if that's a possibility. Again, that requires both of those things really, really require a broader regional and statewide approach to really be effective, and that's part of the thing. We're talking with the state health department, we're talking with the county, we're talking with other folks to try to say, if we need to do this here, it's not just us. Tulsa is in bad shape from a growth standpoint. Oklahoma City is seeing growth. Norman is seeing growth. We're seeing, all across the state, we're seeing a big increase in numbers. And if we're going to, we need to do something together. We really need to act together, and we'll see if that happens.
Numbers in the city of Stillwater right now? It seems like countywide, the last I saw was 247, something like that.
Yeah, just over 200, I think, total.
In Stillwater.
Yes, in Stillwater. That's cumulative since the beginning. So active cases, it's much lower than that.
Yeah.
But I don't have the numbers in front of me. But it was odd over this weekend because we kind of expected a slower reporting this weekend than even normal. But we saw big numbers for Stillwater, it was in the 20s on both Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
We haven't seen Sunday numbers
right.
At all this whole time. They don't really report much on Sunday because the weekends sort of shut down. But we saw a fairly large number on Sunday as well. So I'm not sure what that means for today. The Payne County Health Department did somewhere around 400 tests Friday morning out at the Expo Center, which is great. Increasing testing locally. We certainly have seen an increase in testing, and they're doing a great job of getting people through. So we'll see what those numbers look like from all that testing too.
Very good. We'll have another segment coming up. We'll take a time out now as we're joined by the mayor, Will Joyce. This is Stillwater's Morning Scramble.